Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com. What do you say to this? I know what you're going to say, but I have my fingers crossed that Trump learned from his first. But so when he got elected, he ran. You talked about it. He ran on being an anti-interventionist, getting us out of those wars, investing money back, all that stuff. He's going to not intervene, and that's why the military-industrial complex in Wall Street hated him. And but then when he got in, he put the swamp right in there, right? So Mike Pompeo. He put John Bolton, as you mentioned. But then as soon as John Bolton got out of his administration, he started bad-mouthing Trump like unbelievably, right? And so I'm hoping, do you think there's any hope that Trump learned a little bit from that, and that he actually him and J.D. Vance will try to implement their rhetoric about Ukraine and being non-interventionist? Trump, in his speech, he said, I could end a war with a phone call. So his whole thing is about making deals and ending wars instead of starting them. And what do you think that he learned from his first term, and he'll implement that, or do you think he'll just go right back to the swamp?
I think it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. And so if you're one of those people that's like, well, I prefer to vote for Trump, but these issues concern me, you should be very vigilant and not expect that you can just sit back in your armchair and new wars won't happen. I think what a lot of people in the United States and also in other countries, the way they sort of approach politics these days is, I'm going to vote for this guy, and as long as this guy gets in the White House or whatever, everything, he's going to magically fix everything. I don't think that's true. And in this case, we have an example of how, in his first term, his campaign rhetoric differed very much so from his policy record as president. And I think it's very likely that will happen again, especially when you consider that he has framed himself as sort of this anti-establishment populist, but he's talking about putting people like Jamie Dimon in charge of the Treasury, and people like Eric Prince in the Pentagon. And I'm sure, we'll be making some more, floating some potential cabinet ideas as it gets either closer to the election or immediately thereafter. And so, I don't want to say it's not going to I don't like to make those kind of predictions. But again, I think because of what we saw last time, it's very unlikely that it's going to be really radically different in terms of being less interventionist than it was in the first, in Trump's first term as president. And I think it's actually, unfortunately, quite likely that we could see some sort of hostilities in the Middle East because, Israel is in a war that it is likely to go regional, involve Hezbollah, potentially involve Yemen now, and is likely to spread beyond that. And Israel has been very interested in getting, former Mossad directors have said on record that the goal is to have the United States make the first strike against Iran when they're ready for that war. So if there was any time for that war to happen and be likely, it's over the next 4 years or so. And Trump is, unfortunately very beholden to the Israel lobby, as is J.D. Vance, and really as are both parties. So I think people should be very, vigilant about the threat of more Middle Eastern wars in particular.
So you made this point. We've made this point before on the show. So I was, again, holding out hope because people smarter than me have hope for J.D. Vance and Trump being non-interventionists, going against Mitch McConnell's foreign policy, trying to build up our own manufacturing base back in the United States. Trump saying that he wants to end wars, not start them, and he didn't start in his first term, although he did kill that. Almost did with the killed the Iranian general, but he didn't.
Tried to coup Venezuela.
And then he tried to do the coup in Venezuela, right? Okay. But that's just standard shit. But
okay.
But so just like Joe Biden was allowed to pull out of Afghanistan because the blob had this Ukraine war in the chamber, do you think so? Now it's making me think, as I talk to you, that the blob is going to allow J.D. Vance and Trump to end the Ukraine war, because it's killing. By the way, it's not good for Europe's economy and the blowing up the pipeline. It's not good for Europe at all. I can't believe they went along with it, but they did. But so what I'm hearing from you is that they might let Trump and Vance pull out of and end Ukraine, but it's because they have an Iranian war in the chamber. And
or some other war.
Here's what Vance had to say about Iran.
A lot of people recognize that we need to do something with Iran, but not these weak little bombing runs. If you're going to punch the Iranians, you punch them hard, and that's what he did when he took out Soleimani.
What the fuck? Like, what is the obsession with bombing the Middle East? What is our thing about, so we already overthrew Iraq. We already overthrew Libya. We tried our best in Syria, and we slaughtered all those people, didn't do it. Afghanistan for 20 years. And now they want to go back. Yes. Yemen, Somalia, and now they want to go in and they want to do Iran. Like, what is the bug up their ass with Iran? Now, is that just...
let me explain it to you. The bug up their ass is a policy paper written by this neocon named Richard Pearl in the late 90s called A Clean Break. And basically, that document, it was written for Netanyahu, even though Richard Pearl is an American that served later in the George W. Bush administration and was an architect of the Iraq War. In that document, he essentially talks about how Israel needs to engineer the elimination of Saddam Hussein and also of the Syrian government. And from then on, it expanded to more countries as the neocons got in power with the George W. Bush administration. And one of the hallmarks of the neocons is, again, conflating the U.S. National interest as it relates to foreign policy with Israeli regional interests. And they're not the same a lot of the time. And when it comes to Richard Pearl and Peter Thiel, it was actually Richard Pearl who helped Peter Thiel set up Palantir in the early 2000s with Alex Karp, and connected them with the godfather of modern surveillance, a man named John Poindexter, who created Total Information Awareness and was previously the highest-ranking member of the Reagan administration to be convicted in connection with the Iran-Contra scandal.
He was convicted of five different felonies, right?
Yes. And William Barr covered it all up when he was Attorney General for Bush Sr., and he came back as Attorney General under Trump. And... But what's important here is that during Iran-Contra, people like Poindexter, as well as Oliver North, who returned during the Trump administration to pitch Trump alongside Eric Prince with creating a private CIA. Great idea. Just kidding. But anyway, in Iran-Contra, Oliver North and Poindexter and others created this database called Main Core, which contained the names of Americans who were considered unfriendly and could be rounded up during a vaguely defined national crisis that would include a widespread nonviolent against a military intervention abroad. So a massive protest, for example, against a U.S. foreign war. People could be rounded up and the Constitution could be suspended to put these Americans away.
Hey, I'll see you on tour in Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids. In Chicago, it's stand-up and a live panel show. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to jimmydore.com.